I met Joe, my co-founder, and both of us had this dream that we were gonna do something that would make an impact in the world. We didn't even know what that meant. I think a key thing to learning is having mentors, and a key thing to having mentors is being shameless. Start with the perfect experience with just one person. Get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great. He said, Brian, startups die of suicide, not homicide. All great companies that had a downfall, they died of self-inflicted wounds. Everything around you was designed by somebody else, if it's man-made. You can redesign the world you live in. If you know those binders you put baseball cards in, kids with baseball, we put credit cards in those. We had sleeves of credit cards. 5-star is what people expect, but to build something people love, you almost need to do something more than they expect.
He's an American internet entrepreneur. He's best known as one of the co-founders of Airbnb. He was named one of Time's 100 most influential people of 2015. He's Brian Chesky, and here's my take on his top 10 rules for success.
And I got to RISD, art school, and everyone was like creating their own projects. And I had a teacher who said, you're a designer. Everything around you is designed by other designers. You can design the world you live in. I met Joe, my co-founder, and both of us had this dream that we were gonna do something that would make an impact in the world. We didn't even know what that meant. I got this job at an industrial design firm in Los Angeles that had health insurance. My life felt a little bit like I was in a car, and the road in front, it's like you look out of a car, and the road in front of you looks exactly like the road behind you. And you're like, that's your life. And something about that really terrified me. Joe had been calling me up to try to get me to start a company, and then one day I go into work and I quit my job. I'm living in a house in Los Angeles with 3 friends, and I tell them I'm leaving Los Angeles. And I pack everything in the back of an old Honda Civic, a foam mattress, $1,000 in the bank account, hardly any savings or any money. I have to pursue the dreams. I'd rather fail doing something I love than always wonder what could have been. And so that one weekend, it's October 2007, I drive to San Francisco, and that was the beginning of Airbnb. When I came to the Valley, I did not know much about Silicon Valley. In fact, somebody told me there are these people called angels, and I know they meant angel investors. I think a key thing to learning is having mentors, and a key thing to having mentors is being shameless. In other words, shameless people learn really quickly and are successful. Most people are just afraid to ask people for help. And so we, Joe, Nate, and I were shameless about asking people for feedback, whether it was just our investors or meeting famous entrepreneurs like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, who ended up becoming an investor, or Warren Buffett. You know, you seek out people, and most people are really nice and they'll help you if they can. And Paul Graham said something to me that I'll never forget. He's now written an essay about it. He said, do things that don't scale. And it's counterintuitive. And what that meant for us was we were able to go door to door, meeting every one of our users, trying to provide an amazing experience. And if we had only relegated ourselves to a bedroom or our office, apartment, you know, because that's the only thing that seems scalable, we would never have created an amazing experience. And oftentimes the best methodology is to start with the perfect experience with just one person, get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great instead of scaling something not so great and then trying to improve it. That's really hard to do. I get to San Francisco, I had a rent check of $1,150, and I have $1,000 at the bank, and I can't pay rent, let alone live in San Francisco. It's very expensive. And Joe had the same problem. The first weekend we're there, this international design conference is coming to San Francisco, and all the hotels they're recommending are sold out. We said, well, what if we could just turn our house into a bed and breakfast for the design conference? I mean, people need housing. We certainly need money. We didn't have any beds. I just moved up there. And Joe said, don't worry. I have 3 air mattresses. And we called it not the bed and breakfast, but the air bed and breakfast. We built this website, and we ended up having 3 people stay with us. We made enough money to make our rent, but we also made some deep friends. And that was the very beginning of something that we saw. Many people told me it was the worst idea they've ever heard of. It was months and months and months of people trying to talk us out of our idea. And so we had to continue to think, like, look at the mountaintop and not worry and not look down. You know, Paul Graham, he was our first investor, and I used to worry about all these random things like competitors, kind of cities, all this stuff. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, Brian, startups die of suicide, not homicide. All great companies that had a downfall, they died of self-inflicted wounds. So what are those self-inflicted wounds?
That's a horrible thing to say.
I know.
But anyway.
But it's really, the key thing is about like, there's this thing that like, you're a small company, and you exist because no one else, especially big companies, couldn't do what you could do as a small, nimble company. You know, Pablo Picasso is saying, the older you get, the stronger the wind gets. It's always in your face. It's like small companies become big companies, and sometimes they become really bureaucratic.
and the culture gets lost, people leave the company. That is something, it's not unique to Airbnb, but that's a thing that we have to worry about, and I'm deeply paranoid about that. I want to make sure that we're always a startup, maybe the world's biggest startup, but we stay there.
So you're scared of yourself?
You have to be afraid of what you might become if you're not if you relax, that's for sure.
We believe in a reasonable vision of the way the world could look, and we believe that world can be designed. I mean, I had a teacher at RISD, and he told me, Brian, you're a designer. Everything around you was designed by somebody else, if it's man-made. You can redesign the world you live in. I think so many of us go through life, or not people here, but a lot of people go through life thinking they're living in someone else's world. We enter someone else's world, but we leave our world behind, the world that we've contributed to and designed. And I think this sense that anything can be rethought, anything can be designed, anything around you is just somebody else did that with less information than you have today is an unbelievably empowering idea. And as I think about running Airbnb, I don't try to presume any convention of running a company. Anything could be done a little bit better if you just imagine where you want to get to. We tried to raise $150,000 and sell 10% of the company. That would have been an amazing deal. And we got introduced to more than a dozen investors. Most of the investors we got introduced to didn't even return phone calls or emails. A few of them wrote back and say, this is not something we're interested in. And the very few that met us did not give us money. We're Airbed and breakfast. The Airbeds aren't working, maybe the breakfast will work. So we decided, let's sell collectible breakfast cereal. Obama O's, the breakfasts of change. And then we also came up with a John McCain themed cereal. We ended up making 1,000 boxes of cereal. We sold them for $40 a box, and we made almost $30,000. And this is how we funded the company. Before that, we were funding the company on credit cards. I don't know if you know those binders you put baseball cards in, kids with baseball, we put credit cards in those. We had sleeves of credit cards. I would go to sleep and I'd wake up kind of like, and my heart would be pounding. And I'd be like, oh my God, how did I get myself in this situation? I have no money. We launched a year ago, we still have no customers, and people don't like the idea, and what are we gonna do? Now what? I kept saying, now what? And when is this gonna happen? And then you get the courage over the course of the day, and you'd find a new plan, and you'll get through the day, and you go to sleep confident. You're like, you know what? It's gonna be fine. And tomorrow's a new day. And you go to sleep, and you wake up, and you're like, oh my God, and then your heart starts pounding again. We had launched 3 times. We launched, no one used it, we launched again. And a year later, we have almost no customers, tons of credit card debt, and every investor we knew said no. Many people have asked me why. Well, why didn't you lose hope at that point? And I guess I just believed in the idea. And we believed that if people could experience what we'd experienced, then this would be an idea that would spread. And they just needed to experience it. It would just take more time. One of the most common things people say when they hear about the idea of Airbnb now, and they see people all over the world doing it, is, why didn't I think of that? It's such a simple idea. Why didn't I think of that? You might not have thought of that. It's because when we thought about that years ago, the most common thing people said is, are you nuts? When we design products, we imagine, okay, this is what customers expect. They expect to have a 5-star experience. And then we basically ask the intellectual question. So let's take airport pickup, for example. What's a 5-star check-in experience on Airbnb? The 5-star check-in experience is they give you the address, you get to the house, you knock on the door, and they're there. And they open the door and they let you in the house. And that's 5-star. And anything worse than that, you start to leave 4 stars as you call them. They're 5 minutes away, and you'll probably leave a 4-star. And 1 star is obviously they never showed up. So the bar is kind of low. You knock on the door and they open the door. That's a really low bar. So we ask, well, what's a 6-star? Well, a 6-star is they probably pick you up at the airport. So you don't knock on their door, they actually pick you up at the airport. So what's a 7-star review? You can actually play, it's kind of fun. Well, 7 stars, they don't pick you at the airport, they send a limousine, and you open the limousine door, and they know that you like, I don't know, Pringles. That was a weird example. This is like improv, so we're rolling with it. So there's Pringles there, and there's coconut water, and they know you are into surfing, and there's some surfing magazine, even when you're in San Francisco, you're not gonna surf, that's fine. And so that's a 7-star. So what's an 8-star pickup? Well, an 8-star check-in is, there's you get to the airport and they're like, we're coming, and they're like, where are you? And all of a sudden you see a giant elephant, and an elephant is walking by the gate, the terminal, and there's a parade in your honor, and you get on top of the elephant and you are paraded away. And you said, well, what's a 9-star check-in? If that's an 8-star check-in, how do we get to 9 stars? A 9-star check-in is you get off the plane and you don't even, the moment you step off the plane, there are 5,000 screaming 13-year-old women and boys, and they're holding signs. I call it the Beatles check-in. It's the Beatles in 1964 coming to America, and they're just cheering for you, screaming for you, and they follow you, and they do a press conference in the front yard of your Airbnb. And so then what's a 10-star check-in? Well, I can go to 30, but I won't, because it'll be a long day. And the 10-star is you get to the airport, and there's a little card, and it's got your name on it, and you're like, great, there's my ride, but you realize the person dressed in the limo suit is Elon Musk, and he just takes you to space. And so I've exaggerated to make a point. Usually we don't go all the way to 10, but the whole point is that, like, if what you need to do is just find 100 people that love you, then it's very easy to take for granted. The 5-star is what people expect, but to build something people love, you almost need to do something more than they expect. And so, like, every moment is an opportunity to do something slightly more than people expect. And we play this out, you go to, like, all the way to 10. Okay, now we're not gonna do all that, but maybe suddenly 6 stars doesn't seem so bad. Like, now we should have a service, airport pickup, or something like that. And so we do this about almost every frame of the experience. And this also can apply to almost anything, office design, or like how you hire people. Like, we storyboard end-to-end the interviewing experience. This August, we had, on a peak night, 1 million people, more than the population of San Francisco, staying in a home around the world in 180 countries. And one of the stories I heard was this host, his name is Sebastian, and he says to me, Brian, there's this word you never use in your website. And I said, what's that word? He said, that word is friendship. He said, 6 months ago, the London riots, this was a couple years ago, broke out outside my home. And the next day, my mom called me to make sure I was okay. He said, here's the interesting thing. Between the time the riots broke out and the time my mom called me was a 24-hour period of time. And in that period of time, he said, 7 of my previous Airbnb guests called me just to make sure I was okay. I wonder how many of these people would have called the hotel, by the way. But the point is that Airbnb is not about spaces. And it's very easy to come to our website and you see a couple million spaces, but it's really more about the people. And our mission is to provide this feeling not of space, but belonging. And we belong at home, we belong at our work sometimes, but we want you to be able to belong anywhere in the world in 34,000 cities.
Thank you so much for watching. I made this video because Sine Gelata, I really hope I pronounced that properly, asked me to. So if there's a famous entrepreneur that you want me to profile next, leave it down in the comments and I will join the discussion. I'd also love to know which of the top 10 rules resonated the most with you. Leave it in the comments and I will join the discussion. Thank you so much for watching. Continue to believe, and I'll see you soon.
Airbnb, we created the company not because I wanted to be some successful entrepreneur and make a bunch of money. If I was going to do that, I would not have started airbeds for conferences around the country. That was not going to be a good idea. Right. In fact, I had a mentor, I told him about the idea of Airbed and Breakfast, and he told me, I hope that's not the only idea you're working on. And my mom, growing up, all she ever wanted, because I went to art school, she said, just make sure you get a job that has health insurance. And so when we created Airbed and Breakfast, she said, I guess you never got that job of health insurance. This is what happens. You start having to let strangers in your homes. But one of the things we did a few years ago is we had to ask ourselves, what business are we in? Are we in the business of homes? Are we in the business of space? We made a decision a couple years ago, and we said, we're not in the business of homes or space. We're in the business of trips. That's what we're in the business of. You travel to have a trip, not to have a space. And so space is a part of it, but we're in the business of trips. And we created this thing that we call Snow White. It was basically, we storyboarded out what the perfect trip would look like. And we said, we're only present right now in a few of these frames. We want to get to the place where we're present throughout the entire journey. And so obviously, like dining in homes is one experiment we're doing. We have tours, that's another experiment. But there's a lot of different things. We haven't officially unveiled anything. We want to make sure when we launch something, it's truly amazing.
We may very well be the first website on the internet where you could actually book with somebody else and pay them directly. In other words, there was eBay, and eBay used PayPal, but you didn't feel...
Before PayPal, there was checks.
There was, checks, exactly. And there wasn't a lot of legacy there, because there was eBay and Etsy.
and they were both before us, and Etsy used PayPal, and both of them you would book, and they would send you on a PayPal gateway, and we wanted to feel like booking a hotel. You never leave Airbnb. We would hold, collect, remit the money, and so whereas they were like paying direct, and they would take a cut, and there was 2 different payments. So and that was kind of a crazy idea. It almost scared us. It seemed insane that like you would actually be able to pay somebody else and be able to book something with them, and you would get a reputation system. We decided, let's just do it. And at the time, we're like, this is a little too crazy. It's a little too scary. I don't know if we're allowed to do this. I'm not sure if it will work. We decided to do it anyway. And and so then in the summer of 2008, we ended up basically designing the final version of the product. So we designed this product where you could book someone's home anywhere in the world. We had a rule, 3 clicks to book it button, because there were so many clicks and so many different ways to get a home that it was just too hard. And I remember hearing the story of when Steve Jobs developed the iPod, no matter where he was in his iPod, he wanted to make sure he was always 3 clicks from a song. And we said, well, you should always be 3 clicks from being able to have a paid booking. And so we created this basically a homepage with a search bar, listings, the home, and that's exactly the product as you see it today with reviews, payment system, and customer service. And we basically ended up landing on that.